Hello YouTube, my name is Anthony or Mazna, whichever you prefer. I have recently decided to start a YouTube series on my channel in which I provide videos for amateur and intermediate iOS developers so they may come to my channel as a resource for how to effect different parts of the iOS API. So this is going to be the first one. In this video, I'm just going to explain how to get started with downloading and installing Xcode and then a simple Hello World application. So obviously I already have Xcode installed, but I will show you how to get it installed in case you don't already. So you're going to go to developer.apple.com/iOS and you're going to need an Apple ID. I already have one. And once you're logged in, you can scroll down and here are all the downloads. You can download the most recent iOS release or the latest version of Xcode. And then if you scroll up, you see you can actually switch to the beta materials, so iOS 6. But I'm gonna stick with iOS 5 since that's what I know. And there aren't gonna be so many changes that I couldn't show you iOS 6, but I haven't taken a look at it yet. So for now, I'll just stick with what I have all my experience in. So obviously installing Xcode is really simple. You log in with an Apple ID and you download and install. But if you want to release apps to the App Store, you have to pay a $99 fee to Apple. That's per year. And then they set you up with an iTunes Connect account and you can upload your apps there. And I may make a video showing how to do that. In fact, I probably will, but that won't be in this video. But you know what, I will make a video showing how to get a profile, adding your device to your account so you can debug on your device while you're creating an application. And then I suppose, yeah, I probably will show how to upload that to iTunes Connect. But anyway, yeah, so install Xcode so we can move on to the next part of the video. So once you have Xcode installed, you're going to open it, obviously, and you need to choose create a new Xcode project on the left here, or you can do it from File, New. And now you get to choose a template for your application. So right now there are 7, or really 6, and one's an empty application. The different types of templates, I'm not going to get into explaining them today. But they're kind of self-explanatory. So for example, OpenGL game, it'll make an iOS application with the OpenGL framework already linked to the target, which would be the app. A page-based application you could use for a book or something like that, where you're flipping through pages. Apple has provided the tools you need so that you can do those animations very easily. You don't have to get any kind of third-party API or write your own animation code. And then another example is a utility application. You've seen in a lot of iOS applications, you have that scenario where that has that flip mechanic, that flip animation, and usually on one side is a utility, on the back side is some settings for that utility. We're going to choose a single view application. So this is going to give us an application with a view, one view on top of a window, which is the main window for the app, and you can put whatever you want on that view. So next, we'll call this Hello World. And so here's the product name. Here's your organization. That's just for your own semantics. But here's your bundle identifier. So it doesn't mean anything right now because we're not submitting this to the application store, but each app has an identifier so that when you distribute it to the App Store and people download it, everyone's iOS device refers to the app by that identifier. So you want to make sure it's unique. And when you submit to the App Store, Apple will tell you if it's not, and if you come up with something fairly original, it most likely won't have been taken. Next is class prefix, so you can put in whatever. I could put in Masna in all caps or MA, and every class will have that as a prefix. So if I were to make a new class called my class, it would be MA my class filled in for me. Don't need that. If you're developing a framework or a lot of classes that have service the same purpose, but you're breaking it down into different objects, then maybe it's necessary or appropriate to give a prefix there, but not necessary here. You can choose iPad, iPhone, or universal. Universal means you have to design views for both the iPhone and the iPad, which it's kind of sticky. It's you need to be experienced to do that. In fact, I don't even like to do it because I kind of feel like my code is bogged down, and I'm always afraid that I forget to make a specific view for the iPad when I already did it for the iPhone, and I prefer to just make separate versions of the apps. Now, if you I'm not going to discourage you from doing that if you know what you're doing, but these videos are not targeted for experts, so I'm just going to stick with iPhone, and I will make some videos showing how to make iPad apps, and maybe far down the road I'll show universal. But for now, since it's just a simple Hello World application, we're going to leave it on iPhone. Storyboard. This is something Apple recently came out with, and it's a way to kind of envision the flow of your application on graphically. It's for me. I don't like to use it. I have nothing against it. I like the way that I'm used to, where every class has its own view, and each part of the application is split into 3 files, 2 being the class, or 1 being the header file, 1 being the class file, and then an interface file. But you can use storyboards if your heart desires. And then the next thing here is automatic reference counting. If you are a complete novice, the next few things I say won't mean anything to you, but for those who are familiar with object-oriented programming, for example in Java, you have something in Java called garbage collection. And that's kind of what this attempts to do. See, but before Apple came out with automatic reference counting, the developer was responsible for releasing objects from memory that they didn't need to use in their application anymore. And on the flip side, retaining objects that they are going to need to use in the future. With I think it was Xcode, I guess it would be 4.2 maybe it was, or 4.3, one of the more recent ones, they came out with this automatic reference counting where Xcode does the work for you, so you're no longer responsible for destroying objects you don't need and retaining objects you do need where the compiler isn't sure if you need them, and so it's basically like garbage collection. So now Xcode takes care of that for you. I leave it on. It makes my life a little simpler. I think it's important to know how to maintain objects and how to manipulate memory so that you use as little as possible and you free up memory wherever you can. I think it's an important skill, and I think that expert programmers should know how to do that, because at some level someone has to know how to keep memory clean wherever they can. But if you're just going to be a simple iOS developer, you can leave that on, because it does it. As far as I've seen, it does it perfectly. And unit tests, I'm not going to talk about that here. So let's create our application. We're going to save it to the desktop. Okay, so let's take a look at all the different interface objects we have here, and let's break it down one by one. So first, this is the file navigator. The list of files. On the top, is the project itself, Hello World. Then you have here a folder or group, it's called in Xcode, with some files, with all of the files actually at this point pertaining to running your application. So We have here app delegate H and app delegate M. I'll explain what the app delegate does in a little bit. Then we have view controller .h and m. This is the view that I mentioned earlier when we created the application. It was going to be a single view, and this is that single view. Here is an interface file. So here you can see we can set up our interface. Then we have supporting files. This is plist or a property list. This provides a bunch of settings, if you will, or properties. Makes more sense. That define your application. So, for example, the display name. Whatever you put in here is how the app will show up on the home screen of a user's iOS device. So, if I put in hello, when a user installs this application onto their device, there'll be the icon that you provide, and beneath it, the word hello. The executable file name, your identifier, the version, etc., etc. Let me change that back to hello world. Okay. And then we have the main file. If you know C, you know that Objective-C is an object-oriented library on top of C. So any C code, anything that works in C, also works on an iOS device, or while you're programming for an iOS device in Xcode. And if you know C, you know that every C program starts with the execution of the main function. So this is just a couple of necessary lines that you never have to change that just get the application going. The UI application main function here starts the application, gets it going, initializes the app delegate instance, and then so on and so forth. It just sets off a chain of events to get your app launched on the device. And then a prefix file for APIs that you'll be using. Then you have here all the frameworks that are by default bundled or linked to your application. So the UI kit, the UI kit framework is a framework of objects that allow you to create an interface for your application. So anything that you see when you're using an application, it exists or is defined in the UI kit framework. So buttons, labels, text fields, sliders, progress bars, table views, etc., etc., are all defined in the UI kit framework. And then foundation is everything that the user doesn't see, everything in the background, data, file management, network, that kind of stuff. Anything that goes on in the background that keeps the application running that the user doesn't see. And then core graphics is just is an Apple framework that allows you to manipulate graphics easily. And then the product, the application. So once we build it, red, you see that it's the color red. That means right now we haven't built it yet, and we have not yet created a .app file for launch on a simulator or a device. Once we build, that won't be red anymore, and we will have a .app file that we can run. Okay, so now let's get into the specifics here of these files on the left, the class files. So the way that Apple has set up iOS applications is every app has something called an app delegate, and this is kind of the mediator sort of the entire application. Anytime you want to save some information, you should do it through the app delegate. All notifications that something's happened to the app or the user's done something on their device that your app needs to know about, those notifications are sent to the app delegate. So for example, when the application launches, when it's done launching and the user just opened it, anything in these two braces is called. Any code in here is executed. When the user has the application open and then hits their home button and the application closes, this gets called. Application will resign active, and then subsequently did enter background. And when the user has already opened the app and then they reopen it, enter foreground, and anything in these braces is called. And then subsequently this. And then when the application terminates, which in iOS 2 and 3 before multitasking, that would be whenever the user hit their home button. But now that we have multitasking, terminate only happens in two scenarios. One is where the user manually forces the app close by double tapping the home button, finding your application's icon, holding their finger down, and then pressing the minus, or when the device needs to force your app closed because it needs memory for another app. And it's in the background, it'll terminate, and then anything in these braces will get called. So again, the app delegate is a class that kind of keeps everything running for application wide. Now we also have this class was created for us, view controller. Now a view controller is an object that maintains a view on the application, on the device's screen. So here in this interface file, we have this box here. This gray box is a view. This object, the view controller, controls that view. Anything that happens to that view, the view controller is notified. The view controller manipulates the view, moves things around. Whatever you need to do, you can do from the view controller class. And so we chose single view application, and here is the single view. These three files are responsible for that one view. So let's just do some really simple manipulations of some things that we add on the view. And then we'll wrap up this video, and that will be, so you don't get too overwhelmed, this will be the official first Hello World tutorial. So we have here all the different graphical objects we could add to our view, and we're just going to drag on a label. And now you can type whatever you want, obviously. And the Xcode is fantastic when it comes to laying things out. For one, this view here is free. You can put anything wherever you want. And in fact, you can actually, if you need to move something very minutely, you can come over here. This is the inspector area, and you can choose that what looks like a ruler icon, and you can move things around by 1 pixel at a time. Change the width, change the height, etc. And that's the great thing about, what I personally think the great thing about graphical design on iOS devices is, I recently got into Android programming, and because the Android operating system is supported on so many different devices and so many different screen sizes and everything, they don't have that free kind of, they used to have a layout type where you could put everything wherever you wanted, but they deprecated that because they realized going forward that if screen sizes are constantly going to be different from one device to another, then it doesn't really make sense to have everything placed wherever you want it, because it might look correct on the screen size that the developer designed it on, but then on a bigger or smaller screen size, everything will be moved around and distorted and not nearly what the developer wanted it to look like. So they had, on Android, they have this relative layout or grid bag. Any Java developers know that the standard layouts that Java comes with, and everything, it's almost like tables in HTML. Fortunately, because we're only dealing with two possible screen sizes, the iPhone and the iPad, we have this free reign over where we put anything. Okay, so now we have a label. So let's just build the app. You can see here, this is the app we're working on. This is the platform we're going to build it on. So I don't have my iPhone connected, so I'm just going to build to the simulator. And in fact, it makes a lot more sense to do that, because if I build it on my iPhone screen, I'll have to get a camera going for you to see. And so we're going to click here, Run. And it's going to compile and then link it to the simulator and then launch it in the simulator. And there's our app. Wonderful. So let's do one other simple task or function, whatever you want to call it. And what we'll do is we'll make it so that when a button is pressed, the text is changed to something else. So let's quit the simulator and let's drag a button over here. Okay. Now files owner. Files owner here is the view controller instance that we're dealing with here. So let's go back to the app delegate.m. When the application is launched, an instance of view controller, that class, the view controller class, you can see it here. Alloc means memory is allocated for that class, and then init with nib name means we're going to initialize an instance of the view controller class with the zib or interface file called viewcontroller.zib. That's assumed, so you don't have to type .zib, so that it'll be initialized with this, and that means that whatever we do here is going to show up in that instance when we display it on the screen. Bundle nil, that means when you put in nil for the bundle, that means the main bundle. So everything in here is assumed to be in the main bundle. I'm not going to get into Anna's bundle in this video, but just assume that anything you have in the files on the left here exist in the main bundle. And then make a call to the window, the UI window instance, and set its root view controller to the instance of view controller we just made it. So that means that the window will show this view controller by default, and then we make it visible. So now, back to the zip file. This again, this file's owner object is the view controller instance we're working with. So what we're going to need to do is send an action from this button to the file's owner, and then we can go into view controller.agentM and provide some code to be executed when that button is pressed. So we need to add something called an IB action. All right, so in parentheses here, if you know Objective-C, you know that when you define a method, the first thing you give is the return type. Now IB action means void, means no return type, but we need to label it IB action so that when we go back into, this used to be called interface builder, but is now called, or just, it's just part of Xcode. This used to be a separate application where you would design your interfaces or graphics for your apps, but now in Xcode 4 they bundled it within Xcode, but there's still that legacy denoting of IB action, so we'll just call it change text. Okay, so now we can go back to our view controller.zip file, and we can right click and drag from the button to the file's owner, and you see one of the options is change text. So that means we're going to click change text, and that means that when this button is pressed, a message is sent to the view controller, change text, and now here we can give some code for what will happen when change text is called. And so now here, we want to change the code, the text in this label, this hello world label. If we click on this tab here, you can see that this class, the class of this object is UI label, and again that's part of the UI kit. So we need a reference or a link so that we can manipulate this label from our coding here. So we're going to add something called an IB outlet. In these parentheses are instance variables. Hopefully you have some kind of background in object-oriented programming, so I don't have to explain what an instance variable is. In fact, if you don't, maybe even these videos are too advanced for you. So in these parentheses are instance variables, and IB outlet tells Xcode that we're going to link this up to an object in the interface building portion of Xcode over here. So so first we have IB outlet to denote that it's going to be linked in the zip file, and then we have to give it a type. What type of object is this? And then we're going to give it a variable name, my label. So now we can go back to the .zip file, and now click on File's Owner, and right click and drag to the label and connect my label. So now anything we do in code to my label will change this label here. Okay, and so now let's change the text. My label, text. Text is a property. I'll have a video on properties eventually, I'm sure, but it's really self-explanatory. So I don't even know if there's a point in getting into that ever, and definitely not now. You just my label dot text and then a string of text. In Objective-C, strings are denoted with the @ symbol first, and then it's converted to an NS-string object. So just know that whenever you're dealing with strings, you need to begin it with an @ symbol, and now whatever you put in here will be displayed in the label. So text has changed, and let's run it again. Change text, and the text has changed, and it's as simple as that. So hopefully, if you're brand new, you're excited that you have created this application and you are ready for more, and you can see that the iOS API is wonderful in every sense of the word. It's really fantastic. Apple has done an amazing job, and as I release these videos more and more, hopefully you will agree with me on that. But that concludes this tutorial. I hope you learned something, and stay tuned for the next one.